In this lesson, we're going to talk about workflow actions. Now, there are many actions that are available to you in this workflow section, and I'm going to break them down in separate lessons by different action categories. But in this lesson, we're just going to talk about general rules and guidelines to understand about how actions behave and how they're related to each other and just generally how to approach them. So the first thing to know is that the actions that are available to you are really dependent on what's on your page. So there are some generic ones that will always be there, but there are also a bunch of actions that won't show up until you have specific elements available on the page. So for example, I'm going to add a button to my page here, and let's just give it a label of submit, just to act as a base for my workflow event. So when this button is clicked, then we can start to add actions. All right, so by default, with nothing else on the page, it's a completely blank page. I have a big, actually pretty sizable list of things available to me. I have account actions that are related to the user record. Okay, so all of these have to do with creating a new user, in other words, signing up a user, logging them in, logging them out, updating the credentials for the user. So if you want to change their email or change their password, sending them emails for confirming their email or resetting their password. There's a handful of things going on here. This is all related to that built-in user data type that Bubble has for you. Okay, now the second category is navigation. This has everything to do with moving the user between pages in your application. So you can go to a different page, you can refresh the page, or go to the previous page that they were on. So you have a few options here. And again, I am going to be breaking all of these down in separate lessons. Then you have data actions which have to do with updating your database in some form. So whether you're creating a new record of something, updating, making a change to a record, making a change to a list of records all in one go, or deleting a record or deleting a list of records. Again, you have a few options here for working with your database. You have a few email related options. Depending on what plugins you might have installed in your application, you might see more actions available here. And that's something that I want to continue emphasizing, is that if you have plugins installed or other elements on the page, you will see other options show up. So don't forget to check this area to see what has become available for you. Payment options, I don't have anything showing right here, but if I were to install the Stripe plugin, for example, which is a very popular payment gateway for integrating into applications, and I really recommend that one actually, you'll see a whole list of options here for creating transactions, for retrieving invoices, for creating a marketplace environment like registering sellers on your app, things like that, updating credit cards. And same for analytics. We don't have any built-in actions, but if you install plugins that are related to analytics platforms like Google Analytics or Mixpanel, then you will see different actions become available here to work through those plugins. Element actions is an area that will certainly grow and offer you more options depending on the elements that are on your page. So by default, you really just see this top section here where you can show and hide elements. You can animate things. This alert one, I have an alert already on my page that I had created earlier, but if this wasn't here, then I would not see this alert option here. But because I do have an alert message on my page, I can now choose to show it because the alert is by nature not going to be visible when you load the page. You have to show it in a workflow. And then since we're here, I'm just going to show you real quick. I'm going to add an input to my page. I'm also going to add a drop down. I'm going to add a group. I'm also going to add a repeating group. And let's do a map. I believe maps also add other actions. Okay, so I have all of these other things on my page. So check out and see what has changed here with my element actions. I have all of these new things become available because I've added them to the page. So for example, because I've added the input and the drop down, I now have input related actions. I can set focus to them, which means that your cursor will automatically appear so that you can immediately start typing, or you can reset inputs, which will just clear out anything that's been entered into the inputs. I have a group section here because I've added the group element. I also have repeating group actions to change the list that shows up in the repeating group. Also, because I've added a map element that has its own specific set of actions for working with the map. Again, anything that is going to add extra functionality to the page itself might provide other action options. So definitely remember to check this area out and see what has become available. The plugins section is obviously going to be the biggest example of that because plugins are intentionally to add extra functionality. So any element related plugins that get added to your application, you'll want to check out this section to see what becomes available. In fact, it's possible that the only way to make the plugin work is to use their specific actions here. And then we have custom events, which are for creating much more advanced and customized workflows. We will talk about what you can do with all of this. This section does get very powerful and allows you to create really sophisticated workflows. You can schedule things to happen. You can have things trigger in a specific order. You can have things running in the background with this. So we'll talk about this in more detail in one of our later lessons, but this is a section of its own to work in a much more customized fashion. Now, actions have share a lot of the same properties as the events that trigger them, meaning that they also have conditions. So let's do a simple one here. For the submit button, I'm going to run a very simple action of showing the alert message that I have on my page. Okay, that is this yellow banner that I have up here. This is an alert element, which I added by selecting this element here. And this is one that only shows up when you show it in a workflow. So it will not be visible otherwise. So very simple workflow. When this button is clicked, show this alert message. Now, every single action will have a conditional field here for you to add conditions so that the action only runs in the event that this condition is true. If you leave it blank, then it's always going to run. But you can add a condition like show this only when the current user is logged in, for example, or when the current date and time is greater than some specific date and time. Maybe you have a date and time picker on your element or on your page and you select the value of that. Or when the drop down's value is something specific that you type in here, one value that you dictate here. So you can pick and choose when actions run by controlling the condition here, and make a note of the fact that you can have conditions on the event level or on the action level. Where you put that condition will change the behavior of this, because let's say that I have a series of actions from this one button click. So let's just add a couple example ones. One to send an email, one to sign the user up, one to delete something in my database, and then to show an alert. So we have a whole bunch of things happening, right? Now, if I added a condition to the event, which is the trigger of this entire sequence, then that means that if the condition is not true and it doesn't pass, then none of these actions will run. However, if I wanted to break this sequence apart and maybe skip one action if something's not true, but allow the other actions to run, then I would want to place the condition on the action itself. So for example, if I put a condition on the step 3 to delete something, of when to only have this run when the user is logged in, then that means when this button is clicked, this will always trigger and it will always run because I don't have a condition. Step 1 will run because there's no condition to prevent it from running. Step 2 will run. Step 3 will only run if the user is logged in. If they happen to be logged out and they click this button, steps 1 and 2 will run. It will skip step 3 and move on to step 4. So really, depending on the behavior that you want, it really matters where you place the condition. And there's no right or wrong answer. It's just depending on what you needed it to do. Also, by adding conditions like this, it lets you create a really efficient workflow so that you don't have to have multiple versions of your workflow events. And if you have, if there's only one action that needs to run in scenario A and not run in scenario B, and that's really the only difference, then just having one single workflow with the condition on the action is a great way to go. Otherwise, if you have a condition that really changes the series of actions, then you would want to create an alternate flow. So for example, if I right click on this event, copy and paste, okay, so I have 2 events now that can be triggered when the button is clicked. You can do that. You can have multiple events from the same trigger to run different things. So if I had this first one and the condition on the first one was the current user is logged in, and in that event, this would run, let's get rid of this action for now. So all 4 of these would run when the user is logged in. But if I have a completely separate condition of the current user is logged out, in other words, isn't logged in, and I want something totally different to happen. For example, I'm going to remove these actions, and let's say we want to just take the user to some other page. They click that button and they are taken to the index page. Then you have a completely separate set of actions running based on an event level condition, so that you don't have to worry about placing conditions on every single action. You've just kind of split it out at that top level, at that event level. This is something that you will have to practice and do over and over again to really figure out what is the most efficient way to build our workflows. Where are you going to save the most time by consolidating things or splitting things out? Because you don't want to just consolidate for the sake of consolidating. If it makes more sense to stay organized and create reliable workflows by splitting things out and creating more workflows to do that, that is completely okay. That's not going to hurt your app anymore. If you're getting more reliable results that way and it's easier for you to see things, then do that. Create the separate events. But if you can consolidate things down to single workflows with having conditions on specific actions, then that does make things a little bit more efficient for you, because if you're having to change an action that always runs, then you're only changing it in one place. You're not having to change it in all of the multiple split out events that you might create otherwise. So this is all to say that the conditions, where you place them, really matters, both for performance and also for behavior. So make sure that you understand you're putting it in the right spot, either in the event or on the action level. And also to be aware that you can create alternate flows by doing event level conditions. Okay, we'll talk a little bit more about conditions, and I'll show you some examples in a separate lesson, but I wanted to mention it here because we're looking at actions and different behaviors related to them. The conditions is a very important one. Over here, yeah. Okay, so with your actions, anytime you add an action to a workflow, you'll see a property editor like this show up. Most actions will have some type of setup involved to make it work. So for example, with the send email, you have to fill in all of these fields to tell Bubble exactly what to do with the email. You have to specify the recipient, the sender name, the subject, the body, and this is for this specific action. And notice that with a lot of these fields, you can insert dynamic data. So this doesn't have to be static information that you type in. So, if I want to send an email to the current user, I can't anticipate that user's email because it could be anybody. Anybody could be running this application. So instead, I would insert dynamic data and say current user's email will go here. And this email will always go to whoever has clicked the button. It will be their email address that gets inserted. Okay, so dynamic data can be inserted in the majority of these fields. Actually, should be every single field that are in these actions. They will take dynamic information, but they also take static information too. I can type in, if this is a welcome email that will get sent no matter what when they click this button, then I can have the subject always be welcome email by just typing that subject in myself. That doesn't have to be a dynamic value if I don't want it to be. Okay. And some actions will have required fields. For example, like this sign up to create a new user account. You can see that these are in red because Bubble requires an email and password for a user to sign themselves up. In fact, some issues will show up if you do not have them filled in. So you will definitely know if you've missed something. These are also looking for some value, either static or dynamic. And other actions might not have extra settings for you to worry about, but you will still have a property editor available for you to see whether or not something is required. So an example would be something like the reset inputs action. There's this particular action clears out any inputs that have been filled in by the user. And you can see that there's really nothing to do here. It's just that when this is run, it will perform that action. The only thing that you can modify here is if it should only run under a specific condition. Okay. And depending on what the action is, you're going to have different options. So showing the alert message lets you change how slowly or quickly it fades in, holds on the page, and fades out. Some of these actions will let you change create alternate behaviors. So for example, with the alert message, I've typed in a default text here to always show when this alert message is shown. But in the workflows, I can actually change the message if I wanted. So that way I can use one single alert element on my page with the design that I like. But depending on what the workflow is, I can use the same element, but change the message. And that way I don't have to have multiple alert messages styled the same way on my page. And let's see, for the most part, that's what you're going to, how you're going to create your actions and set them up. You'll just look at the property editor and follow along with the form that Bubble gives you to fill out and have that action function properly. Now, one thing that I want to indicate here is these steps. You can see how each of these actions have a step label. This is step 1, this is step 2, 3, 4, okay? Now, you can have as many steps as you want. There's no limit. Definitely keep the number of actions under control because it will affect your performance. If you need to split things up, then try to keep things organized. You will see immediately if a workflow is not built out very efficiently. You'll notice a lag there. But the more you work with actions, the more you'll become comfortable with what might need to be combined or what might need to be split out. But one thing that I wanted to point out was that the steps don't necessarily mean that Bubble will run them in this order. It's a little bit misleading with this labeling because, in fact, Bubble does want your app to run as quickly as possible. And in order to do that, it's going to run however many actions it can at the same time. So that means that if you have actions that should only run after a specific action has completed, then you'll want to tell Bubble to wait and force a specific order of this sequence. Okay, so again, Bubble will try to run as many of these actions at the same time as possible. These steps, the order that you've placed them here, doesn't necessarily mean that it is the order that it will run everything. So how do you tell Bubble to wait for the previous action to run first before it can run the next one. I'm going to show you an example here. Let me remove these actions. I'm going to just clear these out here, and I'm just going to clear out this condition here. So let's do a very simple example. Let's say that when I click on submit, I'm going to create a new thing, and the new thing I'm going to create is a job post. Okay, I'm not going to worry about filling out any of the fields right now. In fact, when you create a new thing in your database and you do not set any fields, it will still create the record, but all of the fields will just be blank. If you happen to have any defaults set to any of those fields, then those default values will be there. But otherwise, you'll just be creating a blank record. But the point here is that we're doing something in the database, and this is step one. Okay, now let's say I want to show my alert message, and I want to change the alert message to have some dynamic value based on the previous step. So let's say I want my message to say, you created a post on, and then have the date and time of this new job post record. I will only know that after this record has been created. So I need Bubble to do this first and then this one second. So when you want to refer to a previous step, you can insert dynamic data, and this option here will become available. Result of step X, because you can have multiple steps here, and you'd actually have a list of them. Result of step 1, result of step 2, result of step 3. It's only going to show you steps that came before the action you're currently on. So the result of step 1 in this case is that job post. Okay, so the result is going to depend on whatever the action is. If I was logging in a user or doing anything with a specific user, making a change to a user record, then the result of that step would be that user record. So I'm going to show you here. I'm going to insert an action, and let's say we want to make a change to, we'll do it this way. We'll make a change to a thing, and we're going to select the thing to change will be some random user in our database. So I'm just going to search for user, and I'm going to modify this expression and say, hey, Bubble, just take some random user. We're going to select this random, where is it? There it is at the top, random item. Okay, so it's just going to pick some random user. Now, if I go back to my alert message here, I can see I now have these two options. So the result of step 1, which is a change to a user, is a user record. And I now have access to that user's fields. So you can see here, result of step 1, we can think of it as users fields. Or if I did result of step 2, which is a completely separate data type that it's working with, this is working with a job post. This can be read as job posts fields here. And I have my different set of fields. So whenever you use the result of a previous step, Bubble has to wait for that first step to happen. So that's one way of forcing orders of your actions so that nothing gets skipped or things don't run out of order if you need them to run in a specific order. So in my example, let's say you created a post on result of step 2, which is our new job post, and then creation date. This is that built-in date and time stamp. Okay, now I'm going to remove this first action because I was just using it as an example. And I'm going to hold the alert on the page for 5 seconds so that when we preview it, we have time to read this. Okay, so this has to happen first before this one can properly show the message that I'm creating here. So let's preview that and click on that submit button to see it happen. Okay, I have some other random elements. Let me actually just remove those. We don't want that here. We're just going to play around with this button here. Okay, I'm going to refresh the page again. Okay, so this is, we're going to click it, and you can see you created a post on March 24th, and 2 p.m. is the time. Right, now if I go over to my database and then to job posts, and let me go to this one where I have the description hidden so that it doesn't expand everything so wide. You can see here is my new post. I have a default status set to draft that I've set up under the job post under the status title or status field. So that will always get saved, even if I don't set it up in the workflow. And then there's that creation date that we just saw in the alert message. Okay, so that's just something very important to keep in mind when you're building your actions in a specific order. Referencing the result of a previous step will help Bubble force an order. Now, you're not going to be able to do this with every single type of action. So, for example, if I want to send an email after the alert message was shown, I don't have access in any way, like if I did a condition or something, I don't have access to this particular action. Why? Because this isn't referencing anything in my database, and it's fairly safe to run these two at the same time. This is something that gets displayed on the page. This is something that gets sent in the background to a specific email address. So these would be perfectly fine to run at the same time. If there is a use case where you do need to split out your actions much more and you really need to force a specific order, that is where custom events come into play. So remember when we went through the different event triggers that are available to you, a custom event is kind of like a blank slate. But one of the best benefits of this type of event is that you can trigger an event from another workflow. And that behavior is intentionally telling Bubble to run things in an order. So let's say that this custom event, I'm going to give it my own name of send email. All right. And in this event, the only thing that happens is an email gets sent. Okay. So then with my submit workflow, which is what the user will trigger, we'll create a new job post, we'll show a message. And then as my final action, I can go to the custom events list and either trigger an event or schedule an event to happen after a certain number of seconds. Okay, so this is another helpful way to create a very specific forced order of actions when you're building out these workflows. It might not seem super obvious right now why this is so important because we're working with very few actions, but the bigger your app gets and the more complicated your workflows, or really just the more sophisticated your workflows get within your app, you're going to have many actions within workflows. You're going to have actions talking to other events. You're going to have things happening at the same time. You need to create conditions, and there's a lot of logic involved. So I just want to point out these rules, these base rules from the beginning so you understand what type of behavior to expect. And if something doesn't happen like you expect, you can get a better understanding of why. Right. So we will talk more about custom events and how to use those in a lot of different ways in later lessons. But this is another area that will allow you to force order of your actions.